A very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sana Arora. I am a core committee member at IET-VIT and I shall be your host for today's workshop. Well, to begin with, what is an NFT? It is a non fungible token and one of the most profitable assets that you can buy in the crypto sphere. Today, we will be diving into the world of blockchains and learn about the evolution of NFTs beyond JPEGs. To throw more light on this subject, we have with us Revise, a very renowned name in the world of blockchain. Revise offers developers the rails to program NFTs and interact with applications and data. This takes NFTs from static images to interactive objects which can react to applications and real world events. We are grateful to have a brand of this stature on board with us for our flagship event, BlockET. Now, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you our speakers for the session, Mr. Mihir Bikhai and Mr. Anil Dukipati. Mihir is leading product at Revise, which helps developers build fun and engaging NFTs. In the past, he worked as a product manager for more than 5 years at Amazon and two French startups. He completed his master's in management at HEC Paris and bachelor in engineering from BITS Pilani. Mihir enjoys solving problems by building user-friendly products leveraging technology. Our second speaker for today will be Mr. Anil Dukipati, who is the co-founder and CTO at Revise. He will be answering all your doubts. Glad to have you on board, sir. Let's get started with this workshop. The platform is all yours, Mihir.
Hi everyone, it's very nice to meet you guys virtually. And the way we see the next hour or so is we'll start by introducing the world of NFTs and what's happening next, and then Anil will help you and work together with you to build your first dynamic NFTs. I hope you guys are excited about it. I'm going to start with the presentation. And meanwhile, if you guys have any questions, feel free to write it in the chat here, and Sana will throw them on us, and we'll be able to answer. All right. So I guess you guys can see my screen now. Yeah. So starting with NFT 2.0, like what's leading the NFT 2.0 revolution. Let's just take a step back and kind of see where NFTs stand right now. So to explain in simple terms, of course there are hundreds of definitions, but the way we like to think is any file that is digital and lives on blockchain is an NFT. Few characteristics like being unique, irreplaceable, and non-interchangeable is what separates it from other crypto assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum. And why specifically build it on blockchain, right? NFTs has been existing for a while. Why kind of the blockchain revolution made it more mainstream is because of this ability to enable public access and private ownership. What it means is, yeah, you can have a lot of people viewing it, and the ownership still remains private, and it's harder to copy it in any format and just share it. um, a brief timeline. So where it all started is with a few designers or innovative creators who came up with some amazing collections like CryptoPunks, CryptoKitties in 2017, where it was more still in the hands of a selected few and the few people who understood its value. Interestingly, in 2018, the first marketplace for NFTs was created, OpenSea. I guess you're all aware of it, and that's when it started becoming a bit more mainstream. Also, there were tools for developers. So Open Zeppelin was something which was launched, which helped developers to work on minting and minting the smart contracts for NFTs in a relatively easier way. 2019 is when the whole metaverse became a boom. Digital cards was the other use case. So 2019 is when NFTs started finding real use cases. In metaverse, it started being used as a digital asset. So any property that you own in a metaverse is or can potentially be an NFT. Digital cards, well, I mean, all of us have played cards or trading card games as kids, and most of them were in the physical format, which tend to get obsolete, and every year a new collection is launched. The beauty of NFTs is that these cards can be owned digitally, and over time, essentially, it can be evolved. And yeah, so the trading of cards became like a big use case in 2019, and people started collecting all sorts of digital cards, and all the sports and the games started kind of capitalizing on this digital card market, which has now grown to be around $15 billion. So it's a big market. And 2020, like NBA Top Shots, one of the first gaming collections was launched. Rarible was also launched in that year. And what we saw last year was more in the artist revolution. So you see people like Beeple, Board Ape Yacht Club, coming up with new collections, and which was looking at art. So if you see the timeline, what started with just as some you know cool kids building collections ended up finding real use cases, namely in the metaverse, in the gaming industry, in the sports industry, and finally the media industry also started adopting it. However, there are some things which are kind of let's say problems with the current ways NFTs are made, and we believe that most of the NFTs are static. What it means is that it is a static image which cannot change. I was giving an example of trading cards. Um, the way the initial trading cards were made were not evolutionary. So it was just like you have a card of, let's say, I don't know, Roger Federer for tennis, and the card remains the same, irrespective of his performance going up and down. So NFT being static was kind of like something which made it think like everyone sort of thought of it as just a JPEG and not really something which is live. Um, it's boring. Why we say it's boring? Because apart from holding, transferring, or buying and selling was the only use case that was happening. So there was not much else happening. As a creator or as an owner, all you could do is think of it as an investment which just grows over time, or as a collectible. um, they don't interact with the community, with the collectors. So most of the people who got into this industry to do something started getting started feeling that this is not something which will last forever. And that's how, like, a lot of people started working on seeing what can come next. And since 2021, a lot of people have been working on this, including us. So at Revise, we started thinking about what's the next generation of NFTs. And according to us, like, first and foremost, it has to become mainstream, and that is already happening. So Twitter, Instagram, Reddit have already started supporting NFTs in one way or the other. We believe that it has to have some utility, meaning that if you have an NFT, it should give you something which you can use on a daily basis or for events. So, like, a lot of these NFTs are now we believe can be used as an identity or a credential proof. Also, it has to be dynamic, meaning that it has to be linked to certain data and it has to evolve over time. So let's say if your NFT is linked to scores or weather data, based on that, the NFT could evolve, and it could change its property, making it more or less unique. So there's an element of not just buying and selling based on what you had as its initial property, but something based on how the player is performing, or how the market is performing, and how the weather is performing. So it makes it a bit more engaging, we feel, and upgradable, like changing of images, changing of properties, and changing of names, which makes it kind of more fun to hold. Like, if you hold a Virat Kohli NFT and he scores a century, and you see like a nice bat being raised on the image, it's something which will have more value and will be perceived as more fun. So what's driving it? So I think, like, it's also important to understand how this next generation is happening and what's driving it. As I said, like, believe that NFTs are the NFT 1.0 are vintage, but there are some real metrics to kind of signify it, right? So if you look at the trading volumes, they've gone for a toss. The trading volumes are very low. The floor price is below the mint price, meaning that most of the creators who are creating NFTs are not even priced at the price that they minted it. So essentially, they're ending up making losses. So they don't have many incentives to build those old NFTs. The Discord communities, which initially used to be like a boom where at a specific time hundreds of thousands of people would join, are now dead. People are there, but no one's interacting. No one's kind of like engaging with the creators. So buying and holding is not working anymore. And dynamic collections have performed better, and there are some like solid proofs for that. So if you guys are familiar with this game called as Axie Infinity, they came up with first kind of a play to earn game using NFTs, and they clocked volumes of $4.14 billion. Like, it is game changing, and this is something which led path to a lot of other people thinking about becoming a part of this next gen revolution. Engagement happens through games. The Discord channels start becoming more engaging because you're sharing live scores, you're sharing okay how things are evolving, you're talking about like whose collection is performing better based on every match. So the touch points have kept on increasing. Literally every day there will be a change, and that change would be discussed about undervalued or overvaluing the asset. So what are the use cases? Like, we will share with you a few of them to give you an idea and some names. So in case you're interested, you can, read about these products, read about these projects more in detail. The first one being play to earn, we discussed it. So actually it's more like anything like X to earn. That's what we like to call it. It could be play to earn, it could be step to earn, and games, or like even there's a project called a Step In. What they did is they incentivize people to kind of uh, do more steps per day, and that would lead to their own NFT badge being evolved and them getting rewards. That was one of the first use cases. And um, there was a time, I mean 2021, and I think even beginning of 2022, a lot of people in a few specific geographies like Vietnam, Philippines were fully making an earning playing these games. So it became a big thing, and it still is. So play to earn is a real use case which can be which is being used by a lot of people, and which will be generating a lot of income sources for people. So it can be considered as a profession. Where gaming before was more like you'd pay for fun or you'd participate in tournaments, but now you have a way to actually monetize your gaming skills. Token gating. So a lot of these events. So recently there was NFT New York. There are a lot of the crypto events happening, and essentially all the tickets for these games are in a NFT format, and they have different properties. Meaning, let's say if you have access to all, let's say, tier one benefits, you will have a specific type of NFT, which you, when you scan, you would only get access to the tier one events. If you have a tier two one, you will get access to all the tier two events. So in this ways, like with one specific ticket, you can manage different rights and different things. So it's a way bigger upgrade over QR codes, and also it's something um, which can be tracked better, more transactions can be handled, and we are seeing this happening more and more in crypto events. But we believe that this will also become like the gateway or the pass for most of the um, concerts and events in the music industry, in the cricket in the sports industry, and so on. Also artist fan relationships. So a lot of these artists who try to interact with their fans using social media or using some sort of PR have now found a direct way of interacting. So let's say LaMelo Ball. Like, so this was one of the NFTs launched by one of the basketball players. There was this Snoop Dogg metaverse where all the assets were in the NFT format. So what essentially happened is that if you want to follow or if you want to support a specific artist, you can buy their NFTs, and in return they will give you access to a lot of benefits, like maybe some exclusive events, maybe like a breakfast with them. And this is happening. So this has kind of opened up a pathway to have a direct interaction with the artists, and it has become more mainstream. Essentially, initially, only a selected few artists, like the very big ones, would be able to, have a direct relationship with their fans. Now, even any emerging artist can launch a collection, can give access to a few people, and get support in return from their fans. So it has become way more decentralized in that way. Upgradable trading cards. So far trading cards were static, meaning that 2021 you buy a collection, but in 2022 the statistics that are mentioned are not no longer the same. We believe that having this possibility to upgrade would be a big benefit. If you think of it from the Pokemon game perspective, imagine you have a Pikachu, and it has been doing a lot of battles, and you are kind of like gaining points on it, and it could evolve to a Raichu, and that's something which is possible using dynamic NFTs. Association NFT is another NBA project. So after NBA Top Shots, after having this heavy adoption, they decided to come up with a dynamic collection, which is under process right now. So where basically, based on the players' performances, who's the MVP, who has scored, who's made to the playoffs, they would have different badges in the image, and essentially the value of the player's card would go up. Product authenticity, it can serve as a proof, as an origin proof, And this is applicable actually in academics a lot. So like one of the use cases that we've been thinking about a lot is certification or resumes. Currently a lot of people have been working on different projects, especially in the web3 industry, where they, let's say, are contributing to a lot of open source communities. Now what's the proof, right? Let's say if I have contributed to an open source community, how do I prove it in my resume? You can write it, but there is no easy way to kind of verify it, and no centralized way. If you want to verify your college degree, you have to go to every college that you've been a part of. If you want to contribute, if you want to certify all the projects or all the open source communities that you've been a part of, you have to verify it one by one. So that sort of background check is not possible. So with the help of NFTs, that is possible, especially upgradable NFTs. So imagine you have one NFT for you when you start college, and every activity that you do in your college, if you're part of the sports club, if you won a specific tournament, if you are the head of um, VIT, IET, you will get something written on it. So by the end of the 4 years, you would have like a solid proof of everything that you have done, all structured and all verifiable. And that's something which is possible with the help of dynamic NFTs. Metaverse assets. So all, as I said, like in fashion world, like a lot of people have this meta, like a lot of companies like LVMH, L'Oreal, they're trying to create their own metaverse. Snoop Dogg has his own metaverse, and what they essentially want to do is make a lot of these assets in the metaverse available as NFTs, which people like you and me can own directly, no matter which part of the world we are based out of. So let's get a bit into the kind of the flow. How does this work, right? So um, how it is different from static NFTs is, okay, the first process of minting an NFT and storing the data is very similar, but then you have this additional layer of programming. What I mean by program is to kind of define the rules that will govern this NFT. Let's say if you want to say that based on the weather data, I want to put a cap during summer, I want to have an umbrella for rain. So you can define all these rules. You could also say that if a player wins a battle, increase his reward points by 2x, and things like that. So all these rules have to be programmed. So as an NFT programmer, you would kind of come up with your set of rules and define it in a specific code. Revise essentially helps you do that. There are other ways to do it as well, and we'll get into the details with Anand. Um, and after that, once the rules are defined and the NFT is live, um, there are, based on every event triggered. So if a match is happening and if the score changes, or if it starts raining, as soon as you open your NFT anywhere, like in OpenSea or any other marketplace, you would see that the image or the artwork or the properties have changed, and this
नहीं
happens
खोल सकती.
directly based on all the rules that you have defined, and the metadata is updated. So let's say if you want to find a log of all the changes that has happened in the last 10 days, you can find an ether scan like view where you can see, okay, this event happened, the player won a match, because of which this happened to the NFT. A player lost a match, that's why this happened to the NFT. The player, I don't know, became the MVP, so he got a new artwork. So things like that, and this is the whole process. So you start by minting and storing, you define your rules, you make it, as soon as it's live, the event is triggered based on the rules that you have defined and the data that you have connected, and eventually all the data is updated on the NFT end. So where does revise? So this is how, like before, what I explained is how dynamic NFTs work in general, but what essentially revise does is it helps you in the middle two processes, like to store a picture. Storing images on blockchain is very costly and always not very straightforward. So we have come up with our own SDK which allows you to do this in a very user friendly way. So if you want to store all different artworks of, let's stick to this example of Virat Kohli, where he has his bowling average, batting average, and runs mentioned, and an image. So you can store all this data in any store of your choice using Revise, like programming it using Revise. There are you can use IPFS S3, whatever storage you want to use, that can be used with the help of Revise. Um, After that, you program, or you create the rules on Revise, where we have very set, like we have code patterns that can be used. For example, if you want to say that every 5 seconds update this NFT, you can do that. If you want to say that link ESPN scores data and update the NFT after every score update on ESPN, you can do that. If you want to create your own data, like one of the common things that happens in games is there is a random number generator. um, so let's say if you're playing a game like Ludo and you have a random num that is being generated. So here you can set like a random generated data API, which will essentially change the API based on pure randomness. So this is something which is very much used in all the games. And finally, in the end, Revise generates a URL, and this URL is a universal URL that you can use. You can put it in the NFT smart contract, and it is supported by most of the chains. So essentially, um, we make the whole process of right from storing your data, linking new data, updating rules, and putting this into the smart contract very, very straightforward and seamless. And that's what essentially we'll try to do today. um, I guess as students, it's always interesting to know what is, how can you be a part of this revolution. So there are very interesting ways, and happy to share more details. You can reach out to me or Anil on Discord, and we'll share some resources with you. But the first thing we believe is like, for learning, if you really are excited by this, you should attend workshops like this. There will be more and more happening. You should become part of some of these learning DAOs that are kind of creating a whole program, sharing resources. Discord communities as well have people in this space are very helpful, and everyone wants to kind of uplift the whole industry. So to become a part of this revolution, all you have to do is like join these communities with amazing people who will guide you through the whole learning process, and in a very fun way. um, I think once you have basic idea, you should get to building, and I think that's when things start getting real. And we believe that it's not as expensive as it used to be. You can leverage a lot of free resources. So gas fee has always been like a big blocker for people to try out whatever they want to build. But using like Revise SDK, which as well as like test nets, you can use a lot of free resources to build your first collection. You can participate in hackathons where they will give you access. We'll also conduct a lot of hackathons, and of course we'll share details with you where you can actually like build and get your hands on actually building something which you find is interesting. Of course, if you have any ideas that you want to discuss with Anil and me, we are happy to discuss any project that you have in mind. Essentially, apart from building the SDK, we're also trying to help the whole NFT community to materialize their concepts. And we have those technical skills and resources to help you, build and experiment. Finally, yeah, like if all this is still interesting you after learning and building, you should get in this industry. It's there's a lot to learn. It's very new, and the opportunities are endless. Like, a lot of roles that you can look at is, if you're more interested in the tech side of things, you can look at full stack development. You can become a blockchain engineer. Golang is a language which is used mostly, and in India the number of resources for Golang are very limited. So even in our hiring experience, we have realized there's a clear gap in terms of in terms of the supply of Golang engineers. So I think it can be a huge edge in your career if you get proficient in this language. Relations. So if you're a community person who wants to work with communities, work with developers, you can become a developer relation, where you essentially are a part of all the companies' open source communities. You answer questions of developers. You help them build products, and that's something which is appealing for anyone who's interested in community building or growth in general. The other roles are graphic designers. So if you are more creative and if you want to work on the artwork, I think like there's a lot to do, and it will just increase with dynamic NFTs, because now for every NFT, you're not just designing one artwork, you're actually making a lot of artworks. There are very interesting ways of doing it. Like, so we worked on a project where we created a random art generator where you could essentially input a base image, add a few small images, and on a specific randomness, a new artwork would be created every time. So it's something which is at the intersection of development and design, and very, very new. And lastly, product managers as well. So if you are interested more on the functional side of things, as to what's the real problem, how does blockchain or how does NFT solve it, and how can we get this more in hands of people who are trying to solve it, product managers another role. So happy to explain more about my work there, and I will be happy to answer any questions linked to engineering if you have any. So I think that's it from our side. You guys liked it, and I hope you have a few questions. So I'm going to switch back to the live stream, and yeah, happy to Happy to answer any questions, me and Anil both.
Uh,
Sana, do you have already questions that you would want to share, or maybe we can also think we can directly jump to the workshop, and in between, if someone has questions, we can answer that. So as you prefer. So I see a question. What NFT projects are you all excited about? Um, I don't know. Anil, do you want to share some of the projects that are exciting you from the recent years?
Uh, hey Mir. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a shift happening. Like you had the old school NFT projects like CryptoKitties were sort of like Gen Zero. Then came the revolution of collectibles, which became your PFP projects, right? Everything that you would buy to be part of a community and to almost use as your profile picture and your identity, which was sort of the era of like the Bored Ape Yacht Club. And then there were like a whole lot of other in the same category. You had these cool cats. And mutant apes and a bunch of others. I feel like now we're entering another generation of sort of NFTs, like the more interactive NFTs. I think in recent times, one of the coolest projects out there has got to be Stepin. What I find really exciting there is how it sort of ties NFTs uh, to people, right? Like it's not just technology; it's technology that's now connected to people. And in the case of Stepin, it's going into health, and you buy sort of these tradable um, NFTs, which then hook into the app that lets you, let's say, for instance, run outside in the real world and collect points. And the rarity of your NFTs is no longer just dependent on luck or dependent on how many NFTs you buy. It's sort of more revolving around how much you engage with it. Another really cool project is Avegochi, which is on Polygon. What Avegochi is it's basically a collection and a pet game. So you kind of like buy these creatures in the Avegochi verse, and you've got to interact with it, right? So whether you pet it, and each of these characters are really smart. They have a personality. They have like a personality graph, and that keeps on evolving depending on how you interact with them. So I feel like this is the beginning of a new era of NFTs. They're going to be like a lot more in these categories. But Avegochi and Stepen are like two really cool projects for that.
Great. Um, all right. So the next question is, when you say the images are stored on chain, does one need to upload them all at once at the time of creating the NFT, or more triggers plus images can be added later too? You want to
Yeah,
take that, Anil?
I'll take this question. So we don't have to upload everything at once. In fact, that's the whole point, right? Like when it is an evolutionary NFT project, it's kind of going to change over time. And it's kind of going to change depending on the triggers. So, for example, let's just say we're building a gaming NFT collection. Now, you can't predict on day one what gaming assets you're going to need as the game progresses and as you add more levels. So, using the Revise SDK, you can just like you can modify your NFTs, add sources to data, add images, add other forms of media, and you can do that kind of along the way as you go. And you can use the SDK to make that happen. I think there's another question, which is what is the current stack for building a dynamic NFT? It's a good question. So I think there are two elements to it, right? So, for instance, when you think about building mobile apps, there are broadly two categories. So, there is sort of building on the front end, which is sort of whether you're building for Android or iOS, whether you're using React Native or are you using just Android native code. And on the other hand, is you need to build the backend for your Android apps or your iOS apps, which could be built by hand using programming languages like like TypeScript, can be built in Golang, etc., etc. A very similar sense, or you could use a backend as a service solution like Firebase. In a very similar setup with NFTs, there are two directions to it, right? There are two sides to it. Building on the front end means writing Solidity code, building for the blockchain. So if it is in the EVM ecosystem, so if it's blockchains that run EVM, then it's writing the smart contracts layer in Solidity. But beyond writing the smart contracts layer in Solidity, you also have to write sort of the backend services that serve information to this NFT and that sort of allow you to work with the NFT. And the current, like most popular stack for doing that is using IPFS to storing information, JSON for storing the information schema in terms of like the format, and largely using TypeScript to build out the backend that's required to get it done.
All right, I think let's take one last question about from Aryan, and then we can start with the workshop, and we'll continue answering all the questions. So, do you think NFT fever will rise again as it did in 2020 and 2021? So, I think just to clarify, we don't um, believe that it will be the same type of fever, because initially, I think when the initial adoption was happening, things were more based on a specific technology. Now a lot of focus is happening on the infrastructure part. What we mean is that now people are working on building the infrastructure to make NFT more mainstream. So we definitely believe that NFTs will be more used and actually in real life applications. And currently is the time to actually build real use cases, build the infrastructure to support all the scaling issues that have happened in the past. So we do believe it's going to happen. And our hypothesis is dynamic NFTs is what will make it happen. And of course, like we may or may not be right. That's what we believe. All right, so I guess let's get to building. And any questions? So how much it costs to building, which you have asked. I think it will be answered anyways. Essentially, it's free the way we are doing it right now. So we'll share with you how to go about it. So Anil will share with you a document in the chat, and yeah, then let's start. Let's get to it.
Awesome. I'm just going to share a quick link with everybody. I think it's great if you can pull this up and we can use that as reference. I think what we'll do in the workshop is we'll keep it super simple. We'll fundamentally build out like a quick NFT using smart contracts, and we'll use Revise to put data into the NFT. And we can see how using simple TypeScript commands, we can just make updates to these NFTs, and how we can automate the NFT at the end of the day and connect it to a data source and just see how the NFT can evolve right in front of us. Uh, and if all goes correctly, we should be able to create some NFTs for everyone here who's participating on testnet, of course. And you can check it out on OpenSea as well. You can take it home. Just gonna quickly share my screen. And I think as far as the format is concerned, what we should do is I'll walk you through this document I've shared. Please feel free to run with it. If I'm slowing you down, just move forward. And as and when the questions, start posting it, and I'll pause to answer any questions as they come along. So we'll do this in three parts. Part one is we'll just quickly take a look at the skeleton of the smart contract needed, and we'll actually execute it live and we'll deploy it to testnet. Part two will be we'll set up Revise. You can register yourself and get an account at app.revise.network. I'll also share an API key so it's easier to access and it can be much faster. And then we'll add the NFT and the data sources using Revise, and then in the last part, we'll automate the whole thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Is my screen visible, me?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Like I was saying, the very first step in terms of getting started here is you'll visit this website called Remix. It's linked in the document. what Remix is, it's kind of like an ID, right? It's kind of like VS Code or Sublime or any other ID that you're comfortable using, but it sort of just runs it in the browser so you can quickly uh, like test things out, build stuff. It has a proper compiler, so you can actually build your entire smart contract sort of programs right here. You don't need anything else. So you just have to open the contracts folder, and here are like some sample smart contracts they've run. So gonna go ahead and create a new one. Uh, let's say we're gonna work on revise NFT dot sol. That's the extension. Just to get started with, you need these 3 lines of code, and I'll walk you through what's going on here. So the moment you paste the import statement for OpenZeppelin, it's going to go ahead and pull those dependencies. We're setting up the version of the compiler that we want to run this program in. And this is just identifying what license this open source code is going to use. But so NFTs and ERC 721 is effectively just a contract, and it's a contract that has a bunch of rules, and we'll quickly take a look at what that is. And basis these rules, you can trade it, you can mint it, and minting it simply means you're adding an NFT on top of the blockchain and you're assigning it to someone. Um, I'm just gonna go straight to the final version of this code file. You can take a look at how it's
Anil,
broken down.
Anil, just one thing. Can you zoom the screen a bit? I think it's not so clear.
Got it, got it.
Thanks.
Is this better?
Thanks. Yeah, better. It's better.
Okay, I can go a little bigger if this is kind of hard to read.
Yeah, maybe one more size if you can. Cool.
Okay, awesome. So this document kind of covers in detail like what each line of code does and sort of how you can modify it to suit your needs. But I'll just quickly walk you guys through what's happening here. We're just importing the OpenZeppelin's ERC 721 template. Kind of think of this like installing and using a library when you're building like Android apps and stuff like that. So the revised NFT contract is getting initiated here. It is borrowing from the ERC 721 interface, the template. It's extending it in a way. We set up a base URI, which is an empty string for now, and I'll walk you through what's going on there. We're initializing this smart contract when it gets loaded. This is when it's deployed. Uh, and we're passing some parameters here, like just some pre-built static values. We've defined a function that allows you to mint the NFT. And what it's doing is it takes a to address and it takes a token ID. So NFTs are just an association, right? So there is like a list of token IDs and a list of owners of those token IDs, and that's sort of how ownership works. So when you transfer an NFT to someone from one wallet to the other wallet, in the back end, what's actually happening is you're changing the ownership of that token ID. So it's moving from owner A to owner B, and we can take a look at how that works. And last but not the least, there's a function that simply returns the base URI. Just to spend a couple of minutes on the base URI, what the base URI does is the base URI lets you construct a URL that points you to the data for a given NFT. So, like I said earlier, when you mint it, let's say you mint an NFT to your wallet. Now what? Now, where's the data? Like, what's the NFT going to show you? What's going to happen is this is the association. Let's say it's token ID 1 to anil.eth. And let's say that's sort of what's being stored in the smart contract. Now, when you want to render that NFT, it will ask the smart contract. It will fire an function called token URI, which is basically what it expects as a result is a JSON object. It wants to know how to render this NFT, what is this NFT, what's the format, and there's a certain schema to this. This is where we want to get to. Now, where base URI fits into all of this is base URI is used to calculate the token URI. Now, it's quite straightforward. It's simply base URI plus the token ID. So let's assume the base URI here is I know mynft.com uh, forward slash plus the token ID is one. So what you'll end up getting is
Yeah.
when you request the smart contract for the data for token ID one, what it'll return is mynft.com/one. And what it expects is when this URL is pinged, it should return a URL, I mean a JSON object, which can
Okay,
then be
now
used to render the NFT. So that's the whole
I
point of
flip
this
it
base URI
on.
variable here. And we'll see what to put in it. For now, I'm just going to leave this empty, or I'll just say test slash.
Okay.
So when you hit command save or control save on this, command S or control
Yeah,
S,
yeah. Even I can see the
as you can
line
see,
now.
it just created a whole lot of
So I should
dependencies
remain
here.
like
It's
this only.
because it's
Because
using this
before
import
when Pranchi
statement to
was
fetch
telling to
all the
speak, it
required
was like this
information.
only for me. I was
But
normal.
all we need to bother ourselves with is with the contracts folder. We don't need to worry about the artifacts or the dependencies. So we are here, right? We're in
Yeah. I
revise
know
hyphen
sitting in the
nft.sol.
backseat. That's what it was coming
And the
like this
compiler
only.
now has a green tick
Failure.
because this code compiled successfully. So the last option here is the transaction manager. So here's where you can deploy this to the real blockchain, or you can just run it in the browser when you want to test things out. Um, we can ignore the environment for now. We can come back to
Yeah,
it.
I was
JavaScript
writing
PM
it.
is basically just running this entire smart contract post compilation within the browser itself. They've given us a bunch of test accounts with some test
I'll just
ether
let
in
her
it, so
know
we
that
can
now
actually
I'm
like play
back
around
to
with
one
stuff.
thing.
We don't have to worry about the gas limit or
Okay.
anything for now. We just have to choose which contract we want to deploy. Now there are a bunch here. We've just written one, but the reason we have so many more is because we used an import statement. And the ERC 721 Open Zeppelin import ended up importing a bunch of more libraries internally. But the last one is what we want to deploy. And all we got to pass it is the base URI, which was empty earlier, right? We have the option to configure it here in case we need to. I'm just going to pass it the same thing, which is just like test forward slash. And when I hit deploy, there's a green tick here, meaning there were no errors, it compiled. And right at the bottom, you will see all your deployed contracts. When I open that up, here comes the magic, right? You see there are a bunch of functions here, which you have now access to. For instance, so the ones in orange are transaction modifiers. So these are functions you can call to make updates, and the blue ones are data fetchers. These are the ones that will simply get you the information. For example, if I click on the name, it's fetched the name of this NFT collection, and it is dynamic NFT. And as you can see in the code, here's where we set it. If I want to fetch the symbol, it's DNFT, and here's where we set it. Right, so this is now being fetched off the blockchain, or rather the simulation of the blockchain. Uh, Now there are two functions that are most important here. One is mint, which is sort of how we can figure out, or rather how we can assign NFTs to people, how we can allow people to buy NFTs, how we can transfer NFTs to them. And then there is token URI right at the bottom. This is what we had spoken about earlier. So let's just quickly mint an NFT. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this very address, which is in the account right here. I'll go ahead and mint it to that address, and I want to mint token ID 1. Now, when I hit transact, it was successful. And if I go to the balance of function and if I paste the user's address, it should say 1 because now that user has one token, the one we just assigned to him. And if you want to find more information about that token, all we got to do is go to the token URI, paste 1, which is the token ID. And if I fetch its URI, it is test/1. Now, this is not going to render anything because this is not a valid URL. But here is sort of where we can add the revise link. This is kind of where revise comes in. Revise gives you a URL that you can insert into your smart contracts, and then you're done. Then all your programming can happen within the revise ecosystem. Now, in terms of getting started with revise, maybe actually before we do that, let's just pause so we can
Yeah,
answer any questions.
I agree, guys. Let's take a pause here. If you guys want to go through it, if you want to get us to repeat any part, happy to do that. The objective is for you to actually go through this exercise. So we are happy to go through it slowly at a pace where people can follow and actually go through the whole exercise. We'll take a pause for 2 minutes. I'm looking at the clock, and until 2 minutes, you guys can ask us any questions, do the work by yourself, and after 2 minutes, we'll start the next part. All right. So, if you guys don't have any questions, we hope that you uh, manage to understand that part. And now we'll start with the next part.
Okay, I think there's a question someone's asking
Yeah.
that they've built an NFT based application already, and they're wondering if they can use Revise uh, to track the
Right. So,
application.
for the sake of this workshop, we are not trying to create different NFTs, and we are not trying to judge based on the NFT. The whole objective is to go through a proper example where all the data and everything is structured by Anil. So, happy to give you any feedback. You can share that with us, Pooja. But for the sake of this workshop, what we really want you guys to do is actually go through the whole experience of following this code, and try building it with a specific example, because that will enable you to build more and more dynamic use cases in the future. So yeah, happy to review it. But for the sake of this track, we would strongly encourage you, since you already have the experience, to go through the exercise with Anil, and ship this NFT.
Okay. I think
All right, I guess we can move to the next one.
we'll continue with the next part. So what we did just now is we created the bare bones of the NFT. We have working Solidity code that lets you build these NFTs and mint some NFTs and give them to people. What we'll try and do now is we'll deploy this NFT to the blockchain. So far, it was running in the browser. It was running as a simulation, and I'll just quickly show you how easy it is just to get started in terms of moving that to the blockchain. Now, just like when you're building distributed systems and computer applications, you have a production environment and a staging environment, where production is what the end users see and staging is for testing. Within blockchains, because they want to like bring down the barrier to participating, there is a testnet and a mainnet. So mainnet is where you need real ether, or real bitcoins, or real sort of tokens to deploy applications and interact with it. Testnet is where you can do it with test ether, which is basically free. You can just go get yourself a bunch of test ether from faucets. These are just websites where you give them some basic information about yourself, and then they'll give you test ether, which you can then go use to deploy these applications in the testnet. It's the exact same experience of doing it on the mainnet, but for no money, and just for practice, for testing, for building stuff. We try and get some testnet deployments done. Just going to share my screen again. So in this document that I had shared, there's one portion that talks about how can you acquire some test ETH from Rinkeby. There's a link to a faucet. What this faucet does is when you put in the information that they ask you to, it will send you some test teeth. This faucet sometimes has issues, which is why there is another one that you can use. There's one called rinkyfaucet.com. I will quickly put uh, this link in the chat as well. What this expects you to do is it expects you to. Okay, I'm just going to pull up my MetaMask wallet. I'm going to move to testnet. So I'm going to go to the Rinkeby testnet. So there are a bunch of different testnets. You can pick any environment you want. Rinkeby is compatible with OpenSea, which is a marketplace, which is why I end up choosing that. But you just have to copy in your address and request some test ETH. And just like that, they'll just send you some test ETH. As and when that transaction's completed, you will see it show up in your activity, and it will show up in your balance as well. Okay, see right here, I received it. I got 0.1 Rinkeby. I think that's enough for us to run our experiment right now. So I'll just go ahead and go back here. Okay, now let's go back to the top of the screen, right? We had the JavaScript VM, which is where we were running our compiled smart contract. It's still compiled, so I don't have to recompile it again. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead, shut this, and delete this instance of the deployed contract because I no longer want to work in the VM. I want to work on the testnet. What the option we're going to choose from here now is injected Web3. And what this means is it's looking for a Web3 object that it can use to interact with the real life blockchain. And it's waiting for you to inject it into Remix, into this IDE. So when I choose that, it's going to open up MetaMask and it's going to ask me to connect. Now, when I go ahead and connect it, now if you look at the accounts they've given us here, earlier they were like 10 accounts with 100 ETH each. Here there's now only one account because in my MetaMask there's only one account and it has 0.1 Ether here. So I can use this to go ahead and now deploy this smart contract. But this time to the mainnet, to the testnet, which is now no longer in the browser, but it's going to go to the blockchain. I'm not going to go ahead and deploy it yet because we don't have a valid base URI. And once we get a valid base URI, I'll go ahead and complete that. So the next thing we want to take a look at now is how do we generate this base URI? How do we get the link that has the data to all our NFTs? Right. So the thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and get an account from Revise. And then you get an account, you have the option to generate an API key. And that API key is what you can use. It's going to paste a sample API key. So you can go ahead and make an account at uploaddevice.network, and in the meanwhile, you can just use the API key I've pasted in the chat to get started and continue the demo with me. Just want to share my screen again. Right. So what you want to do is create a JavaScript file and open it up inside your VS Code editor or any other editor of your choice. And just want to paste these 5-6 lines of code. I'll walk you through what's going on here. We start by importing Revise from the Revise SDK. So you can use npm or yarn to install the Revise SDK. So you can run npm install Revise SDK, or you can use npm or yarn add Revise SDK, and you will get access to the Revise SDK. Then we want to paste in the authentication token that we just generated, the one I've shared in the chat, or you can get your own by making an account. And then you want to set up the Revise object. And then we've set up a self-executing code block because we want to run some functions in in the using async await. So I've generated a async await self-executing code block, and we can now add all our test code here, right here, and then that should solve it for us. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay. Mir, is the text visible, or should I increase the font size?
Increase a bit, man.
Is that better or a little more?
A little more, just a little more. Yeah, but
Great. So here I'm going to change this old auth code, and I'll paste in the new one, the one that I've shared with you guys. Okay. So now going back to our tutorial, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by adding some NFTs here. But before I do that, let's go and grab our base URI. Now, in order to grab the base URI, we need to add a collection. So I'm just going to say revise dot add collection. So because this library is type safe, it comes with sort of auto code completion, and if you're using TypeScript to run it, it'll even notify you during build time if there's any issues that's going on. For instance, let's say I want to add a collection, uh, and I don't pass it what it's expecting. Let's say I pass it something that it's not expecting. It will throw an error right on the spot so that we don't make any mistakes. Now, what the add collection object expects, it is expecting a name. So I'm gonna call this demo time. Correct. And it expects a URI. Now, this is sort of the base URI that I was talking about. So now you got to name something here which is unique uh, to your project. So I'm just gonna say demo hyphen time, or I can just say demo time. I think this is unique. If it's not unique, it'll throw an error, and it's fine. We can create, we can attempt with a new name. But it's gonna go ahead and store that as my result. It's gonna log my result so I know if it's successful or not. And I'm just going to run this. Great, it worked. So it returned the collection ID to me. And this collection ID is important, right? I'm just going to go ahead and store that here. I'm just going to say that's my collection ID. Now, what is the relationship between NFTs and collections? Fundamentally, NFTs belong to a collection. So if we go back to the smart contract, we had the smart contract that we wrote, which minted token ID 1. It can mint several token IDs, right? Token ID 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like infinite. Now, all of those NFTs are grouped by that contract. So all NFTs are grouped by collections. That's the relationship. Now, the significance of this URI is this URI ends up giving me a unique link to my collection. So before we go ahead and test out what that link looks like, I'm just going to comment this out because we don't want to create another collection again. Now this time, let's add an NFT. So I'm just going to copy this code as it is, and I'm going to paste this here. In place of null, I'm going to pass it the collection ID because that's what it expects. think I've made some mistake here, so I'm just going to go and do this by hand. It's going to go ahead and call add NFT, and it's expecting two parameters. It's expecting token data, and it's expecting properties for the NFT. Fair enough. So let's start by passing it some token data. Now within the token data, uh, what does it expect? Expecting the image, the name, the token ID, and the description. So let's start by setting the token ID. I want to set the token ID as 1. Then it's expecting a name. Let's say the name is demo NFT. The next thing it's expecting is an image. Let's pick the URL from the sample code. Okay, this is throwing an error because token ID is expected to be a string and I've passed it a number. So that's an example of what the type safety can help you with. And last but not the least, I'm just going to borrow. Right. So apart from the token data, which is what I've passed it, it's also expecting properties. And properties are sort of what defines the NFT. Right. For instance, um, in properties you can set what's the attack points, what's the defense points, what's the stamina, what's the color. Like you can choose what this NFT represents. Uh, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that right here. So I've passed it a bunch of data, like I'm setting the attack points at 80, color at maroon, stamina at 90. And last but not the least, I can pass it a collection ID as well. So here is where I'm going to pass it the collection ID. I'm just going to go ahead and run the script. Okay, it's done. Now what I want to show you real quickly is where the base URI is coming in from. So I'm just going to come here and instead of writing test, I'm going to put the real base URL here now. Right, the base URL is uh, we called it demo time dot revise dot link forward slash. That's it. That's our base URI. So if I go ahead and deploy it over here, uh, I'm going to hit transact. It's going to pull up MetaMask because unlike the previous time where it was being simulated, now it's happening on the blockchain. I can go ahead and hit confirm and I can just wait for it for a couple of seconds. It'll go ahead and create the contract. So while that happens, in the meanwhile, okay, it's done. So if you go down below, now the revise NFT contract that's deployed here is actually on the blockchain. And when you interact with it, you are interacting with something on the blockchain. So I'm going to go ahead and mint it. I'm going to mint it to my own wallet. And I'm going to give it a token ID of 1. And it's again going to open up MetaMask because it requires gas in order to execute. So I'm going to hit confirm. And we can view the transaction here on Etherscan as well to make sure that it's being executed or not. It's just warning me this is a testnet and not the real blockchain. I mean, not the mainnet. It's gonna take a couple of moments. Should get processed soon. Okay, it's done. Should reflect here as well. It's a delay, but it's effectively done. Now because it's minted, I can pass the token URI here, and if I click on it, the URL it's returned is right here, and this URL is what is supposed to return information about that NFT. So when I load it in the browser, it I'm gonna give it some time to load. But what that's going to return is going to return yes, right here. Just gonna copy all of that. I'll put it in the ID so we can inspect it. So it's assigned the name, it's given the image, the description. It's modified how attributes are represented by assigning it a trait type and value because that's what the blockchain expects. All of this is happening in the background. Revise handles it. You don't have to worry about it. In fact, it will reassign all these values based on the blockchain you want to deploy it to, based on the category of the value, etc., etc. So this file, this JSON object, is what gives value to the NFT. So if I now open up my MetaMask and if I go down to assets, that's annoying. Just give me a minute. Now, I'm going to comment this out because we've already added it. So there's no point of adding it again. Let's go ahead and fetch all the NFTs we've added so far, which is just one. So I'm going to do wait revise dot fetch NFTs. I'm going to fetch all the NFTs created. I'm just going to go ahead and log that. There we go. So here's the NFT we just created. Now this NFT has an ID. I'm going to copy that ID and keep it right here because we will use that to go ahead and make some modifications to the NFT. Right. So the next thing we want to take a look at is how you can use Revise to make updates to this NFT. Now, before we do that, I think what would be really good is if we can pull up this NFT in the browser. So I'm just going to go visit. I'm going to view this NFT. Right. So here's the NFT that we had created. Here are the properties we had set. Revisions is simply a tracking of how the NFT evolves over time. So right now we created the NFT 6 minutes ago and we haven't evolved it even once. So the revision count is at 1. But let's go ahead and change that. Let's change the stamina from 80 to 100. Let's say this NFT played a game and it evolved, and now its value has changed. So what we can do is we can start by fetching the NFT. So we can say revise dot fetch NFT, pass it the NFT ID. That's the NFT object I will get. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap that in the NFT constructor so I can start modifying it. So I will say revise.nft and I will pass it the NFT object. And now I have access to a whole lot of functions. So for instance, I can say NFT dot, and I have access to a bunch of modifiers for the NFT, right? So let's say I want to change the property. So I'll say set property. Now the property I want to modify is stamina. And I want to set it to 100. I can go ahead and chain a bunch of other commands as well. I can change the image while I'm at it. I can change the name while I'm at it. I can change a whole bunch of things. And at the end of it all, I can call save. Now this is lazy loaded instead of being eager loaded. So it's not going to make a whole bunch of calls while you're sort of, going through the flow. You can make a bunch of updates, and when you finally decide you're ready, you can call save on it. What this is going to do, and I'm going to go ahead and execute this script again, is when it runs, okay, it's done running. It will have updated stamina. Okay, stamina is now 100. But instead of overwriting the information, it was updated a few seconds ago, it will generate a revision history for it, where the original NFT is preserved as it is, and it generates cryptographic proofs for the same. Even though this is happening off chain, this guarantees that this NFT can't be tampered with. Now, if you want to go and take a look at this NFT on OpenSea, it's actually quite straightforward. All we'll have to do is just come here and copy the contract address. So there is a contract address here. And then we can just go to testnet, OpenSea. OpenSea is the biggest NFT marketplace right now. And we can just, that's the account. So what we'll have to do is connect it to our MetaMask to inform OpenSea that we've now deployed an NFT collection. It's going to take a couple of seconds. In the meanwhile, if there's any questions about what we've done so far, I'm happy to answer them.
Sir, I guess there are no questions. You can continue for now.
Okay, so we'll come back to MetaMask. We'll move on to the next part. We'll come back to OpenSea. We'll move on to the next part of the tutorial of the workshop. What you want to now do is, okay, so this is fun, right? This is sort of the ability to make updates to your NFT, and all of that is great. But what if you want to automate it? What if you want to just run it in the background? Assume the use case is you're building an IPL NFT collection where it's like a trading card game. Now the attributes of that player have to change based on how the IPL match scoring takes place, right? Based on how it evolves. Now you can't sit making these updates manually all the time. So Revise has you covered. Now what we expect you to do is, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this one line of code. Uh, with Revise, you can set up listeners. So I can say revise.every. I can pass it a time frame. So let's say I want to say every 3 seconds. That's 3S. If I wanted it to be once a day, I can say 1D, so on and so forth. We can also pass, it is able to pass cron job based time modules. So you can use those as well. And you're going to pass it an API that it can listen to. This can be a simple string as it's shown here. Or you can even pass it a complex function that it expects will resolve to your result. So if there's some processing you've got to do. So I've just created a sample mock API here. It's a weather API that will just predict the weather data. And I'm going to go ahead and start listening to it. Now I'm going to pass it an async function as callback. It will expect some data coming back. There we go. Now, once I'm here, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and log the data to start with, just to understand what data is being returned, and I'm going to run this script. It's returning undefined. Let me go back to the weather API. I'll use the users API, which just ends up returning user objects to me. Okay. So here's like the sample user objects is returning. Now what you want to use from here, let's say, is the first name, for instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the NFT every 3 seconds, listening to that API data source, or when the API pushes information to me, I'm going to call the NFT object, and I want to modify the name of the NFT, and I want to set it to the first name coming in from the NFT, and I'll call save on it. Now, If we rerun this script and if we go back to our NFT here, right now says it's demo NFT. But if I reload the page, it's changed. It's Emma now. And as you can see over here, it's tracking how it's evolved over time. So it's Emma now, but it was Lindsay earlier, it was Tobias before that. Remember, we're changing this every 3 seconds. So if I
Excuse
go
me,
ahead and
I have a doubt. Some people are saying that they are unable to get an API key. So can they have? We have a doubt. People are unable to access the API key. So could you go over that again, or if there's any link for them?
yeah, no worries. Unable to get API key, could you please go over that piece again? Absolutely, no worries. I'm just going to go and help you with that. So for now, for the purpose of this demo, you can just use the API key we've pasted in the chat. Can we repaste that key, please?
Yeah, sure, sir.
So you can directly use that. That should allow you to move forward. But if you want to use Revise for your projects, all you've got to do is, I'll just quickly show my screen again.
And Aryan, in case if it's anything else apart from just the key, do let us know in the chat, like where exactly you're getting, so that we can, so that Anil can help you accordingly. Right now, we
Absolutely.
will go through the process. Yeah.
Right. So right here on the top, there's an option to generate an API key. When you click on that, you can use this to effectively generate your key. And then you have to remember the key, you have to copy it because we don't store the key for security reasons. We only store the secret, which you can revoke access to from this user interface. So app.revise.network is where you can go to generate and fetch the key for yourself. Okay, I'll just quickly resume and we can go back to questions if there are any. So what this 3 lines of code has done is it's connected my NFT to this API. And based on how the API updates and sends results, it's modifying my NFT. It's a simple example, it's a simple use case. But what I want us to focus here on is, let's gonna pull that up real quick, is what this means for NFTs, right? Like what this implies. So we've changed the NFT 15 times, and the last update was 2 minutes ago. Now you can connect this NFT to any data source. So if you're building a mobile game where you want to issue characters as NFTs to your users, you can use your NFTs to now track the progress of your of the user. Now, imagine having a character with a stamina of 100 is way easier to play with than a character of stamina, let's say 50. So a player who's upgraded his NFT over time to 100 can now sell his NFT to someone who wants access to this faster without putting in the time, and it creates like an in-game economy, right? So that's an example of a use case. So similarly, there are like tons of use cases that can be built on top of interactive NFTs or dynamic NFTs, and Revise is just one tool you can use to make that journey happen. And where Revise fits in is exactly this. It's using the SDK to connect your NFTs to data sources and make updates to your NFTs and to add data to your NFTs. Uh, I want to come back to OpenSea and see if that. Okay, it's finally okay. Right. So I can go to create. I'm going to import an existing contract that we've deployed on the testnet. We've deployed it to Rinkeby. Just going to go back and grab the contract address and just paste that in. The testnet version of OpenSea can get buggy at times. Another way to verify if the contract was deployed or not is to just test it out on Etherscan. So as you can see, this contract was deployed and it made a couple of transactions. Contract was created and then we minted an NFT into the user's account. Let's come Going back here. Okay. I'm gonna give it some time to pick it up, but effectively what's gonna happen is once you submit it to OpenSea here, it'll start showing up in your collections list, and then you can start trading it and selling it on OpenSea itself. So I think that pretty much summarizes the workshop. We can open it up for more questions.
And I also wanted to just make a quick announcement. So essentially, the idea was to go through the whole code. I guess probably everyone didn't have the time to follow it step by step. What we are expecting is that for the revised track, you have until end of day, even actually until tomorrow morning, where you can submit all your entries. You can let us know, when you're done. We will review all the entries, and we would have prize money and giveaways, rewards for people who finish it. So throughout the day we are available to answer any of your questions, and we really hope that you take this whole exercise as a learning to build your first thing and go back and kind of build it on your own and share with us, and we will also give you comments on how you could improve it or anything like that.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm pretty sure everybody is going to take part in the workshop and also have fun getting the giveaway prizes. If there are any questions, we'll look at them right now.
Yeah, I guess let's wait for 5 minutes and then we can all drop off. In case if anyone has any questions not linked to just the workshop but also in general about, yeah, okay, questions are coming.
We
Let's go
have two
through them.
questions. Do we need to sign a new contract every time we update the NFT?
We need to sign a new contract every time we update the NFT? No. So in fact, that's sort of the whole point of revise. That's actually a very good question you brought up, right? So if you observe during the demo, every time you wanted to interact with the smart contract, you had to sign it because you're effectively paying gas every time you do it. I imagine building a use case where the NFT updates like, I know, let's say 10 times a day per user, and you have like 100,000 users. That's just not possible to do on chain in a scalable way, both money wise and logistics wise, which is exactly why you can use the off-chain version, which is Revise. So what Revise does is all updates are happening within the Revise sort of product line, and it streams those changes back to the blockchain every time the wallet or OpenSea or someone wants to query it. So the answer to that question is no. You won't have to sign it when you're updating the NFT. When you're storing and updating that information off-chain.
We have another question by Rakshit. Do we need to be fluent with JavaScript to use Revise?
Not really. So the reason we have our SDK out in JavaScript is because it's sort of the most popular language. It works across both front end and back end. The library is TypeScript and JavaScript compliant, but you don't have to be proficient at all. It uses very basic sort of commands in terms of like function calls to get stuff done. And we'll add support for other languages like really soon. I think we're going to add PHP, Golang, Java, Ruby, and a couple of other languages as well.
We have another question. Data on blockchain cannot be changed, but how does dynamic NFTs work?
Correct. So data on the blockchain can never change. That's true, but it can append. So, just like if you own some ether and you transfer it to a friend of yours, you're effectively changing the balance of your account on the blockchain. So it can change. What can't happen is you can't overwrite it. You can append it. It's kind of like a ledger, right? So transaction one says Aryan has 10 ether. Transaction two says Aryan donated 2 ether to Mir. Transaction 3 says Mir gave it to Anil. So the end values are changing, the trail is not. So similarly in dynamic NFTs, if you observe in the demo, whenever we change the NFT, while the NFT updated, there was always a trail of how it changed and what the previous versions were. So it can change in dynamic NFTs, but they'll always maintain an audit trail. Can we mint NFTs without paying any gas fees? There are a couple of ways to get it done. Someone has to pay. So if you don't want your users to pay, if you're building an app or an ecosystem, you can preload wallets that will mint it on the user's behalf. But at the end of the day, someone has to pay the gas fee. So the gas fees goes to the miners who are actually making updates to the database and sort of storing this on this global ledger. So that can't be avoided.
So we had another question. Can we stake an NFT?
Absolutely, you can stake the NFT, right? And the use case for staking NFTs is just there's so many different reasons why. So one reason why you'd want to stake NFTs is because you want to increase the scalability of the solution. So let's say you built a game. Now you want to trade cards within the app or within the website. You can't do these trades on the blockchain constantly. It'll really rack up costs in terms of gas, and it'll be extremely slow. What you could then do is you could stake your NFT, let's say with Revise for instance, and once it's staked, you can make all those trades happen offline using the Revise SDK. And then at the end of the day, when you want to withdraw your NFT back into your wallet because you want to sell it to someone else on Etherscan or Magic Eden or any other marketplace, you can unstake the NFT.
We have one last question today. How do IPFs make NFT concept possible?
Okay, so what IPFS does, so IPFS is basically like Dropbox, right? It's kind of a storage layer, very similar to Dropbox, in fact. So you drop in a file, and when you visit a link that's given to you by IPFS, it will load that file. That's all IPFS does. Now, how IPFS links to NFTs is fundamentally, if you observed during the demo, we needed that JSON file in order to render the NFT, in order to give the NFT its visual appearance. So IPFS simply holds that JSON file, and IPFS links are used as base URIs, as links you put in your smart contract to render the NFT. So that's the relationship between IPFS and NFTs.
Thank you, sir. With this, we come to the end of the workshop. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It was great. It was a great session, and we look forward to the responses by the participants. Thank you once again.
Thank you everyone for attending the workshop, and yeah, feel free to reach out to us, and happy to help you throughout the day or even tomorrow to submit. And yeah, excited to see what you guys build.